There's a lot of talk of mitochondria these days, and
Yes.
we've had 10, 20 years now of research that has really brought to the forefront the importance of mitochondria. For a long time, it was kind of just, hey, this is one of many organelles in the cell. It's the powerhouse of the cell, quote unquote, and it takes in carbs and fats, pumps out ATP, and that's sort of all you need to know about those little mitochondria in your cells. And
Right.
now we've had a couple decades of research that have really put mitochondria to the forefront of discussions around health and many, many different diseases. So, and there's also sort of, I would say, different stories, different narratives and paradigms that have been presented around mitochondrial health. I'm curious, just to start this, how do you see mitochondria in the
Right.
overall picture of human health and disease and longevity? How would you describe their role?
Yeah, that's a good question. So ultimately, when you look at the studies on longevity, the key thing that they find with centenarians and people that are living healthy lifespans without chronic illness is that they have resiliency. And resiliency could be like, temperature resiliency, they could be immune resiliency, blood sugar resiliency, cognitive resiliency, physical exercise resiliency. And resiliency can easily translate to how effective the mitochondria is in those systems. And even though the mitochondria gets, focused in as the energy powerhouse of the cell and it makes energy, but it is a cell signaling unit. I mean, the mitochondria does trigger the initial stress response. The mitochondria does initiate through different proteins, you know, um, normal immune activation for an infection, and it generates heme to produce hemoglobin. I mean, it's like what we need to recover. And, in a clinical setting, you can even go down to say, not only just longevity mechanisms of aging, but a person's ability to recover is like directly related to the fitness of their mitochondrial systems. So if you have, let's say, three different people, let's just say two different people, say one person had a traumatic brain injury, one person has a chronic viral infection. Let's say both people have the same things. One, like an example of a traumatic brain injury for both people. Well, the one that has greater mitochondrial efficiency is probably going to recover faster. If someone has a viral infection, the one that has probably greater mitochondrial integrity is going to recover faster. So whatever this condition is, and our ability to heal ourselves, homeostasis, is all energy dependent. So, if you look at any, if someone looks at any biochemical pathway and sees all those diagrams and charts, like that all runs on ATP. And then the mitochondria we have are directly impacted by the things we do in our life. So, we have to be able to make mitochondrial biogenesis. That requires activation. You have to be able to clear mitochondria, mitophagy, and things like lack of sleep or um, overeating or hormone inefficiencies. All these things can impact how we clear out these different hormones. These mitochondrial proteins and structures. So it's one of those things where, as a clinician, the biggest clue for us is they come in and they say they have fatigue, and then we're like, okay, the mitochondrial system is inefficient. And then the question is, well, what kind of fatigue do you have? And then, the next question is, what do you do? And ultimately, when we look at the mitochondria from a clinical perspective, the mitochondria has needs. The mitochondria has to have glucose, right? Or ketones, one or the other. But let's just stay with glucose for now. But if it has glucose, and then, it's what it needs, the substrate to run its processes. If someone gets fatigued after meals or gets shaky lightheaded between meals, we already know a mechanism where the mitochondria can't function. The mitochondria needs oxygen. So if someone has asthma and we hear wheezing and they have some allergies that are upper respiratory, we know their mitochondria is going to be inefficient. Someone has anemia and they can't carry oxygen to the mitochondria, we already know there's not going to be a chance for recovery. In the clinical setting, we have like deal breakers, like there's no way they're going to be able to recover because their mitochondria isn't able to produce ATP and get those things to work. We know the mitochondria is extremely sensitive to free radicals, oxidative stress. So like chemical loads, things that create the inflammatory response, depletion of antioxidants, those things all cause the mitochondria to fail. So what we're trying to do in a clinical setting is start to dissect that what's the cause of their fatigue, how many mechanisms they have that are causing their expression of fatigue, because fatigue is basically a clinical window of mitochondrial efficiency. So, people that have great mitochondrial function are the ones that aren't tired, the ones that can recover quickly from workouts. So when we hear things like, I can't focus for a period of time, or I can't work out like I used to, or I can't recover from my workouts, those are a clue to us that their mitochondrial systems are inefficient. And typically, it starts with loss of endurance first. So it'll be like, I can't run like I used to, right? And that's muscular mitochondria. I can't read as many chapters as I used to. I can only read like 3 pages a night fatigue. That's brain mitochondria. So whatever system we're looking at, what we'll see is the mitochondria fails is fatigue is like endurance issues first, and then it gets into progressed fatigue. And the way I kind of look at my patient population is when they tell me I have fatigue, is what are the other things that may be red flags of what the mitochondria needs that we need to find? Do they have intermittent fatigue? Do they have fatigue all the time? Or is it debilitating fatigue? And debilitating fatigue, we're worried about things like cancer, malignancy, autoimmunity to the mitochondria, which we see with people that have, like the so-called chronic fatigue patterns and things like that. But that's kind of the thought process. I just kind of rambled on, but you answered the question. I started talking.
No, that was great. And I love that you've presented resiliency at the beginning of your answer as a sort of foundational aspect of your answer, because this term resilience is something that is obviously incorporated in modern vocabulary, but it's typically framed as a purely psychological concept, as something that happens in the mind. It's like, how resilient are you? But there's a physiological basis to resilience. And as you said there, it's all about stress buffering capacity at the cellular level. And stress buffering capacity is essentially the synonymous with energy production capacity. How much energy can your cells produce to meet the demands that are on them from those stresses, which relates to your ability to not only handle the stress, but also you gave the example of like traumatic brain injury or viruses or things like that. How quickly can you bounce back, which is, oftentimes the difference between bouncing back or not bouncing back, being stuck in chronic illness if you have such a degree of overwhelm of your cellular capacity for bouncing back.
Absolutely. And, when you look at a chronic patient, the person who's gone through the healthcare system and they're getting all these different diagnoses and no one can really figure out what's going on, and one from practitioner to the next, the key thing is they don't have the ability to recover, whatever it is. Then the question is, why do they not have the ability to recover? And then you can go to different pathways. But one of the key things is ultimately what's causing the mitochondria to not function, to not work. And then it can be a whole list of things. And that's where it can be a little confusing. Where things go wrong is like people will hear about mitochondrial function and go, oh, we need some CoQ10. If we had some CoQ10 and we had like really fancy niacin or niacinamide and nutrients like that, or pycnogenol or something like, everything is going to work. And it's like, no, because in the clinical setting, when we see chronic patients, they're coming in with bags full of supplements. They're not, it's not a supplement deficiency issue. For some people, taking various nutraceuticals can maybe give them some minor function, and maybe help on the recovery pathway, but you really have to treat the underlying mechanism of what's happening. So usually when people can't recover, it's like this load of various things that are causing the mitochondria to not function. And then the basic things we already know. Like, we know people need to have sleep. We know people have to have movement. We know people have to have nutrients and healthy diet. We know people need to have relationships. All these things actually have been shown to impact mitochondrial function, whether it's biogenesis or mitophagy or these different pathways. Now, ultimately, like for me, I see a lot of patients that have traumatic brain injuries that I work with. We're trying to help them recover. We'll see patients that have like chronic illnesses and they can't recover. And the first question is, can they make mitochondria? And how do you get mitochondrial biogenesis? So how do you make more mitochondria? Because we can change our mitochondrial concentration in our tissues and cells by things we do, right? So if you look at the literature, what they're looking at is these signaling agents for mitochondrial biogenesis. And for the most part, they really tend to be things like antioxidants, as things like green tea, things like resveratrol. They turn on the cellular messengers that can theoretically produce mitochondria, but they don't produce mitochondria. They just turn on the messenger pathways. And then what you actually need to have to produce mitochondria is activation. So you actually have to stimulate movement, and you have to have hormesis and stress to the system to make those things work. So it's
like the analogy that I often use is building muscle. It's like you're not going to build muscle unless you've created the demand that makes your body want to adapt to that demand by building more muscle.
Exactly. And it's the same thing when we do like neurological rehabilitation after someone had a stroke or injury. And the question is like, what can't you do? I can't walk in a straight line. Perfect. That's your rehab.
Exactly.
You touch my nose.
Exactly.
That's what you're going to do. Because the
Right.
area of your brain you've injured now has to reconnect, and mitochondria is necessary. So as you keep activating those pathways, you're going to stimulate mitochondrial biogenesis. So I think one of the key things that's missing in the clinical world, especially in the world of nutrition, is just focusing on dump, like a supplement dump, like a hormone dump, like clearing toxins, and not really discussing activation and what things are. So like back to the scenario, if a person can't read a chapter, they can only read 3 pages. So the typical thing is, oh, I read 3 pages, I'm done. It's like, no, you're going to get your gain when you read 3.5 pages, and then maybe 4 pages. They keep pushing that system, and that's how you actually stimulate mitochondrial biogenesis. So mitochondrial biogenesis is the key thing. Now, interesting thing also is physical activity and movement has been shown to build mitochondria through all different tissues in the body. It's not just specific for the muscles. So, I mean, they find like liver mitochondria concentrations go up when people do physical activity and exercise. So one of the key things is there has to be some kind of movement. There has to be some type of activity tolerable to what the person can handle, you know? And I remember meeting a mentor a long time ago of mine. He goes, listen, when someone gets sick, you got to get them to move or they'll never recover. I don't care if they throw them in a lake, you know, on a barrel and they're just paddling away or whatever they need to do.
Yeah.
And I've actually used an analogy. I've had some patients that have been severely ill, like, and like just lie in your bed and just move your arms and legs for as long as you can,
Yeah.
and then that's it, and then recover, and then try to do that several times throughout the day. And as they do that, they're building mitochondria throughout the whole system. Like a sedentary lifestyle is going to completely impact the potential for mitochondrial biogenesis, but you don't have to be super athlete. Like you just have to work to your level of whatever fitness you have, and then push it a little bit more, and that causes this hormesis effect. And it's the same thing with brain. Like if a person damaged their cerebellum and they have balance issues, and we just have them work on their balance system for whatever level of time they can before they start to get dizzy, and then they back off. But if that action doesn't take place, like that stimulation to turn on these protein messenger pathways, they're proteomic pathways to generate the activation of mitochondrial biogenesis, where you actually turn on these production of these, people cannot recover. So this is the problem with the supplement game and so forth. Now, there are some people that are so severely mitochondrial compromised where you may have to take down their inflammatory load before they can move and do things, right? There's people like, I've had patients that say, I can't, if I go outside to get the mail, I'll be in bed for the rest of the day. Like, I can't do that yet. And those are like the most severe kinds. So, you know, for them, you might, have to kind of reduce their load with other factors first, but then encourage them to go get the mail and get some movement.
Yeah.
And it's like, there has to be some degree of hormesis or suffering to turn on these mitochondrial biogenesis pathways. And I think that's one of the biggest things I see neglected in the, in the clinical setting world, is emphasis on everything besides that.
This is why I love you, Dr. Kharrazian. This is what you just talked about is something I've been talking about for years, and it is my criticism, my constant criticism of the functional medicine space, because very few people have really understood mitochondrial biogenesis and its importance, and the role of hormesis in that. There's so much of, I feel, mitochondria have sort of come into vogue now. Everybody's talking about it, but for the most part, the paradigm is sort of, hey, you probably have mitochondrial dysfunction, and we'll run these organic acid tests and maybe a mito swab test or maybe something else, and based on that, we'll determine you have mitochondrial dysfunction. So here's some B vitamins, some alpha lipoic acid, some CoQ10, and some PQQ, and that's the solution. That's the protocol for mitochondrial dysfunction. And it's like, no, we have so many lines of evidence showing that essentially the modern lifestyle causes a loss of about 75% of the mitochondrial capacity by the time a person is 70 years old. There's this massive atrophy in the same way that a muscle tissue, that a muscle atrophies if you immobilize it, put it in a cast. It's the same thing is happening internally at the mitochondrial level. We have to rebuild that cellular engine. And I'm so glad that you've emphasized the importance of hormesis in your answer there. I'm wondering if you can speak to kind of a little bit more in depth of the typical functional medicine paradigm of mitochondria and mitochondrial dysfunction, and how most practitioners are attempting to treat it.
Well, just like you said, they're going, there's something wrong with mitochondria. Let's do an organic acids test or the urinary, and they see this beautiful map the lab prints out, different metabolites of mitochondria, and then, oh, here's dysfunction, like you need zinc. That's a ridiculous model. I actually remember talking to one of these labs that does it. They go, why are you selling this nonsense? Like it's so ridiculous. Like this is not how this works. You're not capturing true mitochondria with your urine outputs. It's not happening in the cellular level. Jumping to like a single nutrient for that is like clinically, who wrote this? A real clinician never wrote any of this stuff.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, it sounds like it's very scientific, and I think people are drawn with that. And there's a point where I just almost have given up on healthcare practitioners too. I'm an educator, and I'm like, how could you not critically think? Like, why do you think?
Yeah. So many of them are just protocol followers, and they don't think.
Right. And it's like, what, like, how do you think the metabolite in the urine is like telling you what's happening in the cellular space? And then unfortunately, what happens to the practitioner, to the patient is they get a supplement overload of stuff. They get all this money spent on extra diagnostic testing. They may not still have any outcomes or benefits, or maybe one supplement actually helped them, but it was totally unrelated to the lab test. It's just something their body like responded to, and then like, oh, must be working. And I think if a practitioner gets a few of those accidentally, then they'll see how it works. And in particular, I'm not a big fan of the organic acids test. I think most of those metabolites, first of all, from a laboratory perspective, working in the lab as a PhD student, they're not reproducible. Like a lot of these markers are terrible. Like if you measure the person at different times, if you even do the same biomarker the same day, they're not that effective. So now it's like if you take someone and gave them like a dice and said, I want to give you a dice test, and every time 6 comes up, I want you to use CoQ10. Every time 1 shows up, I want you to use a multivitamin product or whatever. And someone comes in and go, you got a 6. Okay, you're going to go on this. And then eventually there's going to be some people that maybe it helps, but it doesn't mean the testing was accurate. So I think that's the level of frustration I also have. The biggest clinical indication that a patient's mitochondria is improving is their endurance for whatever they couldn't do improves, and their fatigue, or if their energy levels themselves can be changed. But first it's going to start with endurance. So now they can do things longer, now they don't fatigue as much, whatever it may be. Right. So that's the key thing. And resiliency. So now they can eat maybe a meal and they're not totally passing out. Now they can go 3 hours without a meal and their blood sugar is not dropping. Now they can lose a night's sleep and they're not getting cold the next day. And all these things are resiliency, and resiliency is a big part of it is mitochondrial integrity.
I started to realize how critical it is to understand that stress is inherent to our life. And it's very important to acknowledge that and design our day and our lifestyle, and especially our diet, to get the best out of stress rather than fall victim to it. I realized very early on that when I expose my body to nutritional stress, that means lack of food. That's the meaning of nutritional stress in this case: lack of food, lack of energy deficit. My body responds with amazing compensating actions that help me better endure hunger, better endure stress, perform better. And in fact, I noticed how my body was transforming itself already early on to become leaner and meaner on the good way. The impact of intermittent fasting on the cognitive function is amazing. Later on, 2 years later, after the way that was published, they did the first studies on intermittent what was called intermittent, by Professor Mark Mattson, who found that, and he quoted my book, by the way, as the first references. They contacted me and asked me for testimonial on his article in Lancet Journal. They found that when it put mice and rats on a diet similar to the way diet, there was extension of 50% in lifespan. Rejection.
What percentage?
50% extension of lifespan.
That's massive.
And when they injected mice toxin that cause brain dementia or disease that mimic Parkinson, Alzheimer, the mice on intermittent fasting rejected this toxin. Wow. It was incredible. This is the first time that the warrior diet got recognized as something that is real. The BBC gave us incredible break at that time. But I'm telling you, Ari, when I came with this concept, it was very strange to people. Nobody believed that you should deliberately put yourself under stress. Yet, in my latest book, which is a continuation, in a way, of the concept of the warrior diet, I clearly try to prove and bring the evidence that not only stress is inherent to us, healthy mammals, healthy organisms are programmed with the instinct or desire to put themselves under stress. Ari, as an educated person who already understands it, that probably will be even more intense for you. If I now take away your ability to exercise alone, how would you feel in several days?
Yeah, it would. You're absolutely right that I would immediately, and I've done this because there are certain times when I can't exercise for whatever reason. And I start to get irritable. I start to get depressed. I start to get just annoyed. And yeah, you're absolutely right that it was a big aha moment for me in reading this section of your book where you talk about this, because I had never really thought about this kind of innate programming that we're all designed to seek out stress, which is
we are designed to seek stress. Absolutely. I mean, we have here rescue dogs and cats that we take to our house, and all of them, with no exception, you can see it on animals, especially predators. They are looking for stress. You don't give it to them, they will figure out a way to do it.
Yeah.
They are kittens or puppy dogs, they hustle and they bite each other, and children are raised. It's just that this concept is being crushed out of us. But it's not just physical stress, it's nutritional stress. And it's not just fasting. I believe that we have a tendency, healthy humans and animals, to crave for food rich in nutrients that mimic stress. I have been involved in this research project. It's called SAF, Stress Activated Food. Well, plants especially, I explain in my book why plants are more hormesis oriented than any other organism on the planet.
Ori, let me interrupt you really quick, because I feel like there's probably going to be a segment of some of these people watching this are maybe have already heard me talk about hormesis and are already familiar with the concept, but some people might not be, and there might be a lot of people listening or watching to this that are kind of in the typical paradigm and thinking around stress. Stress is bad. Stress is a very negative thing. We need to avoid stress at all costs. So this discussion that we're having seems probably very odd and very counterintuitive for a lot of people who are not familiar with the concept of hormesis. So can you back up and let's go a little bit big picture for a minute and just explain, what this is all about and why stress is actually not what most people think and why it's actually an important part of our lives.
If I could say to the layman in the shortest way what hormesis is, it's the process of adaptability to stress. Each organism on this planet, from bacteria to human, is programmed with the capacity to take advantage of hormesis. Means in all organisms, exposure to low-level stress, especially nutritional stress, will promote adaptability and resistance to high-level stress of the same stress. So exposure to low-level stress promote adaptability to intense stress, and there are certain kind of principles of hormesis, which I mentioned in the book. This means that exposure to high levels, instant exposure to high level stress, for instance, if you're not prepared, can kill you. Classical example of hormesis is vaccination, learning. Ari, you learn something, you start with one step at a time, exercise, fitness, you go to the gym, you don't lift immediately 300-pound weight, you start with small, you feel the pain, you let your body adapt, gradually you're resistant to weight load increase, you're becoming stronger and stronger. This is the way we learn everything. Everything has a romantic principle inside. The question is not how inherent it is to us. The question, what the hell are we going to do with this? How do we take this feature of hormesis or this knowledge and take the best advantage of it? How far can we go with this? In my book, I try to prove that we go much farther, far and beyond what conventional thinking is. I believe that we can extend our life, and maybe more than that. I believe that we not only can extend our life, we can improve the quality of life. I strongly believe that a guy like you, and there are many people out there, not the ideal specimen today, but definitely in a good shape and smart, maybe even more than those who are smart and can take advantage, I believe, literally can get laid when they're 80 and 90 years old. Why do I say that? Biologists already know that natural selection keep you around when you still can reproduce. I do believe that it is possible, but that's not the only reason natural selection keep organism alive. Natural selection keep organism alive when they contribute to the species, when they contribute to the quality, the survivability of their own species. And obviously reproduction and good genes is one thing, but there are other ways to contribute. Contribute to knowledge, being a guide, is definitely a big advantage. We have no idea today how far we can go. And yes, Ari, if you and everybody, or those who wish to do that, can possible extend life, double lifespan, and maybe more so, as written in the Bible, everything in our concepts of survival, culture, and priorities would change. You no more need to think about retirement when you're 65 years old, unless you choose to. Your dream, romantic dream, and creativity could go on way to the future. Imagine that your brain will never age, and there is no reason for your brain to ever age. One day we are all going to die, but we don't have to die old, like typical old, and we definitely don't have to die with an old brain. There is a lot of evidence that our brain, if we just keep the structure good, we'll talk about good, healthy mitochondria and good, healthy system that become resilient to stress, will never die with an old brain. So imagine how the equation between experience and improving your IQ as time go by, what kind of discovery and innovation we can create and how we can improve our lifestyle. So yes, in time of Donald Trump, when everything looks so gloomy and dumb, when the system doesn't even make sense, there is at the same time an evidence that we as humans can excel far and beyond what we dream. And it has nothing to do with the color of our skin or with gender or with anything that people try to stigmatize in. You can come with what Trump called a shithole country and still be a genius and a specimen. It's time to focus ourselves from a different direction, break the old dogmas, understand the true life and the true potential of life that we live in, and move forward from there.
Beautiful. So basically, most people are running around with this idea of stress as bad and something to avoid. And in fact, what you are teaching is that stress, the right kinds of stress in the right dose, done systematically, systematically integrating them into your life, is actually the crux of health and longevity and resistance to disease and resilience to stress.
Ori, I'm glad you talk about it, because those who think that stress is bad, they are right. Stress can be horrible. Stress can kill you. And there are certain kind of stressor or chemicals that are so poisonous that can shatter your life very fast. What I'm trying to show that the same deadly stress that we all run away, if you just know how to take advantage of it, it could heal you. It will heal you instead of killing you.
Mm-hmm.
We are programmed in our body because we were created in a world which is stressful. Yes, the primordial world and the world today was and have been stressful, now more than ever with a chemical around.
Mm-hmm.
So rather than running blame away and avoiding everything, we should condition our body to resist stress. And I'm literally talking about, for instance, lack of food, starvation can kill you. We know that human and animal can die from starvation. Yet it is lack of food that have shown to extend life when regulated smartly of all organisms. Again, from bacteria to human, and in many times more than double the lifespan. Nutritional stress is a key.
Mm-hmm.
However, Ari, it becomes more controversial when we come into toxin, because one of the stress principles is that low dose of toxin can create resistance to high level of the same toxin. And when it creates resistance, it actually does multiply other benefit, including anti-aging benefit, makes just your body stronger and more resilient to multiply other stressors.
Mm-hmm.
If I put you in an exercise, certain kind of exercise just not make it building your muscle. It makes you resilient to also disease,
Mm-hmm.
resilient to aging. And the same with fasting. So exposure, there is a phobia of heavy metals. There is a phobia of MSG, and for good reason. However, if people would just understand the truth, small amount of heavy metal are very beneficial for you. In fact, you cannot even survive without them. And so is small amount of radiation. And so is small amount of MSG. MSG is a horrible toxin, horrible. It's obesogenic, especially the chemical MSG. But in small amount, it appears in one of the healthiest food that you eat, from kimchi to yogurt and everything.
Yeah.
We evolved to be resilient to all this toxin. In fact, it's part of us.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to know the truth. Ari, you're right. We need to find the map, understand them, how to navigate in the world that we are. And that's what the 7 Principles of Stress book is all about. It's about navigation and taking advantage of existing stressor, not only to be okay, not only to strive and extend life to the point that go far and beyond what we believe.
Do you think that there is a significant difference between short duration fast, let's say an 18, 24-hour fast, or even a 36-hour fast, versus a 3-day or 5-day fast? And if so, what differences do you think there are, and are there any studies to speak to that?
Well, I think, you bring up a really good point. When I reflect on the benefit of autophagy, this waste and recycling process, and look at the research, it really appears to be that greater than that 24-hour mark, we get a significant upregulation in autophagy. That has to be balanced with the individual that is practicing intermittent fasting, because if you are of the mindset that I want to preserve lean muscle mass. So I'm very careful and conscientious about long fasts. So when you start looking at 48, 72-hour or longer fasts, yes, there'll be increases in growth hormone. There'll be increases in autophagy. You fast long enough and you'll get some stem cell activation. You can impact telomere length. But I think it has to really be, I think for me, clinically, it has to really be balanced with, are you a very lean, like 45, 50-year-old woman that you don't want to sacrifice losing lean muscle mass at the expense of doing longer fasts? Now, if someone were being treated for cancer, if someone were dealing with some significant neurological issue, you might be able to, find a healthy balance in between, the different metrics that you're trying to work on. But from my perspective, the average person doesn't need to be doing, if you're thin and lean, you do not need to be doing these really long fasts on a regular basis. And so unfortunately, this is something I'm starting to talk more about. Hormesis is a dual-edged sword. So beneficial stress in the right amount at the right time but I'm starting to see what's evolving is if more is better, then I need to do more fasting, more exercise, more restriction. And so I always counsel patients about being conscientious about what are their goals, where are they in terms of a baseline, are you a man that's 45 that is insulin resistant and not metabolically healthy versus a 45-year-old perimenopausal woman who's already on the thin side is struggling to build healthy lean muscle, and trying to find like where that sweet spot is. So there is a place for fasts that are under 24 hours. There's also a place for longer fasts, but it really, to me, depends on a lot of what's going on clinically and someone's metabolic health. And also, again, that hormetic sword, understanding that you want to be conscientious about how much hormesis, that gas pedal of pushing things forward and determining what's going to be most advantageous. I'm very protective of metabolic health. I'm very protective of muscle protein synthesis. And I could go on and on for why I feel that way. But in terms of, research, everything that I've read really leans into more than 24 hours is going to upregulate autophagy in particular. And for a lot of people, that's what they're most interested. This waste and recycling process, getting rid of old mitochondria, organelles, et cetera, at the expense of going a little longer with a fast. But I think it always has to be taken in the context of what are your goals, what life stage are you in, what's your metabolic health parameters.
Okay, I want to come back to that, and I totally agree with you on hormetic stress. This is the subject of my next book. It's all about hormesis more broadly and the different forms of it, and there's absolutely a biphasic dose response, and we've known this for a long time when it comes to exercise. If you take athletes, you do too much exercise, you get overtraining syndrome. There's absolutely a negative consequence to doing too much of even beneficial stressors, because at the end of the day, this is a form of metabolic stress to your system. And we are deriving benefits by stressing the system transiently in order to stimulate adaptations that ultimately confer benefits. But if you are chronically pushing the stress switch, or for too long of a duration, or too intensely, you absolutely will get negative consequences, just the same as with any type of stress. So with regards to autophagy, one thing that a lot of people I find don't know in the general public is that most other types of hormetic stressors also stimulate autophagy. So many people have talked about this as a unique benefit of fasting. But in fact, there's lots of research on sauna stress, heat stress, as well as exercise being powerful stimulators of autophagy. I'm curious if you have done a deep dive into the research on that and I think this is an area where the research doesn't really exist, but to compare perhaps the degree to which the autophagy switch is turned on, how long it's turned on for, or if there are distinctions that are important around which specific tissues and organ systems of the body experience a lot of autophagy when that autophagy button is pushed via, let's say, fasting versus exercise versus sauna?
That's a great question. And I don't honestly know, I'll be completely transparent, if there is research that exists that compares these different strategies all at once. I do agree with you that a lot of the social media content I see, or people just reaching out and asking questions on social media, they don't understand that there's other ways to evoke or upregulate autophagy. And so I love that you brought that up. And I think that whether it's high intensity interval training, which again is not 30, 40, 60 minutes of HIIT, it is, if you do it right, it's really short, intense bursts of physical activity to gas yourself, or, lifting weights, or, cold exposure, or, heat exposure. And I think there's this continuum of people that want to take things, they want to take everything to an extreme. So I'll give you an example. You see a lot of people doing cold plunges, which I think is a fantastic idea if you can tolerate it and you like cold things. And there are actually genetic polymorphisms that will lean into people that are less stress tolerant around cold or hormesis. And so I think that there are those of us that would do very well having 30 seconds of a cold shower, or doing some cryotherapy that's 3 minutes, which is pretty tolerable, versus sitting in a plunge pool for an hour outside in negative 20-degree weather. I think that that hormesis bucket is one that is broad, and certainly one that is not just synonymous with just fasting or pushing the autophagy envelope. I do think it's helpful, though. I like variety. I think it's important to practice variety. And so whether or not it's someone's fasting one day and the next day they're doing some HIIT and the following day they're doing cold exposure, I do think that our bodies are designed to be challenged and not just the same old things every single day. I think that makes us stronger, more resilient organisms. But no, I'm actually not. And I think that would be an interesting, study to look at different studies on that, to find out which one is most efficacious. Because and I'm a fan of being efficient. So if there's a most efficient way to upregulate autophagy over any other, I'd love to know what those are.
Mm-hmm. Fortunately, we now have things like this,
right?
Which I want to talk to you more about. Textbooks full of thousands of scientific references.
Amazing.
on hormetic stress,
right,
and the anti-aging cytoprotective, cell protective mechanisms that it induces.
Right.
It engages in the cells that lead to disease resistance, stress resistance, and longevity enhancing effects.
Right.
So we now have that research that
right.
you were yearning for back then.
Yeah, and it's fascinating. So in this end, it's the principle of adaptivity, of flexibility, of flow. It's really life and health is about, do we flow, do we let go, or do we get stuck, or do we hold?
Mm-hmm.
And in this sense, really is my ultimate healing tool that I actually wrote in Hebrew, the book completely, but then I didn't publish it. So I published my second book as the first book. It's called Open Heart Medicine, the infinite healing power of love and compassion. But beyond the words, the heart is an organ that flows all the time, right? Blood is flowing in the heart nonstop. And the moment so the survival of the heart is to keep the flow. To keep the flow. And how does the heart keep the flow? What does the heart need to do in order to give nourishment? It needs to take all the stress from every cell in the body. It needs to take all the junk from every cell in the body. If it doesn't get the junk, it won't fill up. It won't be able to really give. Our mind works differently. Our mind stops and analyzes, stops and looks and thinks and what. So naturally, it's very hard to get the mind to be open and flowing. It takes a lot of training. It's much easier to connect with the heart. So the concept of adaptivity of flow is really evolutionary process. And within it, we really have to recognize, at least my life experience, and a lot of studies, of course, supporting it. We always do the best we can. It's really important. Sometimes we hold to something that happened to us. Why did we do it? But it was the best we could have done at the time. And many times we get into this neurological pattern, into habits, into multi-generational epigenetic habits or behavioral habits that really affect us. So the real process is the process of letting go. And in this sense, one of the reasons why we see changes, you can say, and mutation and adaptation is really to offer us a lot of choices for survival. And while people talk about mutations that are lethal, but are part of training us to survive, they are the cost, right? One of the images in life, like when people in the army go through basic training, some people get injured and killed as part of the training. And this is part of the immune maturity. Mm. And this is really, as you said, there's always a trade-off, there's always a reason. Why do we have childhood diseases? And that's a sensitive topic, so I won't go into the treatments for this politically, but we have childhood diseases to train the immune system. Mm. It's a training, it's an adaptation. And we can see that when populations don't have childhood diseases, they have more chronic diseases, right? It's very well documented, more cancers. People that don't spike fever have more cancer. Right, because
so there's research, for example, on chicken pox, right, on varicella zoster, and you get exposed to that as a child, and kids who got that infection have decreased incidence as an adult
40, 50 years later of various kinds of cancers. That's what you're referring to, right?
Exactly. So it's well documented. And families where you have a lot of cancer, you will see the members don't spike temperature. They just cannot spike, which is part of the training. So that's what I'm talking about, totally. So
which again speaks to these trade-offs, right? Like if you say chickenpox is all bad, let's get rid of chickenpox,
right?
And let's say you accomplish that objective,
right.
Well, now you are paying a price for it as adults, where you now have increased risk of cancers. And obviously, for people listening, this is just one example. It is there's a research that already exists and many other examples beyond chickenpox of these kinds of trade-offs around childhood infections, for example. And it's likely that probably this extends far beyond even what the existing science tells us.
Of course, and again, it's a trade-off. And when we look in society, it's addressed based on the lowest socioeconomic basis where people can't get treatment. So how can you prevent? So each one makes their own decision, but that's an example of trade-offs. It's huge. Mm-hmm. And it's an example of survival, right? There's, you want a child to survive, even if there's a cost later on in life. That's example of a trade-off. Other people will say, no, I'll take the risk because I want my child to be healthier later on. And that's a philosophical point of view,
right?
But it's an example. And this is really the quality of adaptation, is to be able to handle stressor as a risk in order to create a beneficial response. That's actually a very important statement. And why? Because we live in a reactive world, where when we have a stressor or when we have a problem, we react with anger, with stress, and these are not the beneficial approaches. The beneficial approach is the adaptive approach. So from a biochemical point of view, if we create enough reactive oxygen species, for example, when we exercise, we want to hope that the body will be able to use this to improve its antioxidant capacity.
Mm-hmm, that's right.
So next time, when you have a stressor that is emotional, psychological, the body will respond in a healthier way. And this is really the role of the heart, Ari. The heart is built to do this, because when the heart gets the junk from all the other body, it doesn't react to it. It accepts it. It uses it to connect with the universe, and it transforms it into nourishment for the body. And that's really the principle of hormesis in a interpersonal level, in an holistic level, really that affects every cell in our body, because the electromagnetic field of our heart reaches every cell in our body. So yeah, this is amazing. This research is fascinating because it's putting into science what people experience intuitively for millennia,
So in the original conversation we had, you presented kind of this information on galectin-3, and it was kind of more from the frame of stress or threats in the body, things that cause damage, raise galectin-3, and then this creates this sort of toxic vicious cycle. And what I asked to you, and I would like to ask again to you, though you've already presented a lot of sort of layers preceding that in this discussion, this version of the discussion that help already answer this question, but I would like to ask directly, so we can speak to this. How does hormetic stress, the concept of hormetic stress, fit into this narrative of how stressful, damaging stimuli stimulate galectin-3, and then this results in accelerated aging and pathology and disease? How can we create a synthesis with the idea that hormetic stress, things like exercise, things like breath holding, which also induce this thing you talked about earlier, hypoxia inducible factor, which sends the cell this signal that puts it on this trajectory towards anaerobic glycolysis. So we can have
hormetic stressors that induce some of these same factors, stimulate reactive oxygen species, hypoxia-inducible factor, heat shock proteins, that create some damage in the cell as a result of these sorts of stressors, and yet paradoxically they're linked with disease resistance and extensions in longevity. So how do we make sense of that?
Right, and it's not it's a great, oh my God, I want to make sure I don't get carried away. But yes, it's a great question. And so you can look at these challenges as a training, as when you don't use a muscle, it atrophies. So we are using the repair mechanisms of the body in a dosed approach, right? It's very dosed. We do intermittent fasting. That there is a big difference. I think we talked about it last time. Don't know if it was on the recording after, but the difference between intermittent fasting and autophagy and ketogenic diet. Very different, So, and I would like to touch it to explain is fasting as a immediate survival compared to longevity survival. So when we give small doses, we get the body to exercise its repair. And slowly we can build up, right? When you exercise, you can't run, 10 miles right away. It's really interesting. I really don't like running, really. And I couldn't run like half a mile, okay? Then I decided about a year ago that I'm going to see what the mind can do. So the first day I ran like, 300 yards. And then within a month, I ran I think 13 miles up and down the hill, and I had to call the clinic to cancel the appointments, and like with a coat, it was cold, but it was the mind relaxing into this. Mm-hmm. And I could feel how I'm using this to actually expand, and get healthier, because my mind was into it. It wasn't competitive. I didn't care how fast it's going to be. I really was in the process of it. And in this sense, the hormetic stress is essential because, and it depends on the people. Hormetic stress is essential for people who underutilize their capacity. Uh-huh. So people who are very smart, the people who are very smart who can get away with learning only for 5 minutes or with knowing 10% of the material, and they can kind of put it together. So a little bit, we can do the same with our life, with what we do with our life, with how we use our body. The hormetic stress mobilizes other parts in our body that usually are not active. When these parts are not active, and I'll give you another image to this. If you're using 70% of the body, then 30% of the body is not utilized. It's not getting oxygen exchange. It's having a different microenvironment. It's not under the ongoing control of the body. And it's really a time bomb, because things can grow there, develop there, which are really can be trouble, like cancer, for example. So when we are creating this stress, we are utilizing the body to the maximum, as long as we don't tear the rubber band. And in this sense, I am more and more convinced that intermittent fasting is essential. And if you look at so many cultures, they used to eat early in the morning and stop eating at 2 p.m., at 3 p.m., at 4 p.m. Very, very, and which was like, there was no light, there was no, how to make the fire at night and whatever. So this gives the body a repair time. And really, if you look, so I thought about autophagy, intermittent fasting from your question about hormesis. If you think about intermittent fasting, once you run out of your glycogen, or most of it, the body is getting a survival signal, right? A stress signal.
For people listening, glycogen is stored carbohydrate. We store it in our muscles, and we store it in our liver as a fuel source during prolonged periods without food.
Immediate fuel source. And we are getting, the body feels, oh my God, and then it starts mobilizing storages, okay? Mm-hmm. So it would start with fats, because it's smart, and then it will use protein. Now, because fats are not highly used, like protein and carbohydrate, and because many toxins are fat soluble, it's a great place to store stuff we don't want. Mm-hmm. Now, so we know toxins, but in my book, The Survival Paradox, for people who read it, you will see that I treat the cells like beings, like live entities with a personality. We also store traumas in the fatty tissue because we don't have to mobilize them. We don't have to deal with them. It's a closet. So as we start breaking a little bit of fat, it's only intermittent fasting, we start releasing some of these things, some of these stressors, right? But it's in a capacity that we can detoxify. It's not too much, right, Ari? It's a little bit. And that's the beauty of it. And if our MTHFR works well, if our detox work well, we are coming out of it lighter and cleaner. So this is a little bit of a deeper view of the whole idea of autophagy. We are cleaning, you fix the roads at night when there are no cars, right? You can't fix them when there is traffic. And that's the value of this. And as we fix them, we are repairing something that is not working well. And this not working well comes to the surface at the time of induction of stress. Because if not, we function at 50% capacity. We function at 30%. We start exercising. After a few minutes, we got to mobilize our mitochondria. Right? And then we get adaptation. We can run longer. It's easier. Our muscles don't work. That's the hormetic effect.
Yes.
Not only on longevity, on an immediate level. And the same thing happens from a meditation point of view. So I want to talk a little bit about it. Because people think that meditation is just clearing your mind and not engaging in thoughts or just staying in the place between thoughts. But really, meditation gets deeper. The thoughts are not, or the feelings are not our enemy. Meditation is not what we experience, is our relationship with what we experience. So the process of meditation, when you really let go, all this stuff comes at you. And either you push it away, you detoxify, or you just relax into it and let it dissipate. And as it dissipates, you feel a major cleansing. That's an hormetic effect. The stressors that usually will cause damage are now used for a release process, for a letting go process. And that's why you can benefit and improve your health with meditation, and you can improve your health with exercise and fasting. And you do the best when you do them together, of course, which is in so many cultures. When I teach my retreat, it's a few days and we see cancer markers getting better. We do intermittent fasting. We do a cleanse with lemon and olive oil at night. We eat very, very clean. So there is a breakdown process. We do yoga, we do qigong, we work the body, and we also let go and do healing and lie down and do visualization. So you do the letting go and you get the circulation. And that's why sometimes you see in the stories about meditators who were in caves for years and got very sick, and finally they got out and started taking a walk, and their health gets so much better because they are integrating the movement. So yeah, it's a dance. It's an amazing dance, and it's tough. It's tough for people in the conventional medical community because people are so built into algorithms, and and if A happens, you do B. If C happens, you do D. Life ain't so simple, It's bad news, and we have to adapt to it. It's part of Hormesis,
Yes. So with hormetic stress, this is interesting because we become stronger by challenging ourselves, our cells as well. We literally make ourselves stronger, and this happens on many different levels. We challenge our mitochondria during stress, for example, exercise, for example, fasting, breath holding, sauna, cold exposure. We are challenging our mitochondria, putting stress on them, and in response to it, they are growing stronger. We are stimulating free radicals, which transiently cause stress and damage the system. And by doing so, we engage adaptive mechanisms inside the cell where they increase their internal antioxidant supply to neutralize, to better resist
and be more resilient in the face of future exposures to reactive oxygen species, to free radicals. So we train the cells to become better at neutralizing those forces. Linking this up briefly with the lactic acid story and the anaerobic glycolysis, there's a lot of very interesting stuff around that from exercise physiologist Inigo San Millan, who has really in recent years reshaped our understanding of lactate. He's done a lot of work on the role of lactate in relationship to cancer, which you've touched on, and a lot of other aspects of it that we didn't know. I don't want to digress too much, but a lot of very interesting aspects of how lactate works in the system. And one of the things that happens with hormetic stress, particularly endurance exercise, is we train our mitochondria to better use lactate as fuel. And particularly in slow twitch muscle fibers, they become much more efficient at soaking up the lactate. And given that, as you described earlier, that becomes a signal that locks the cell into this anaerobic glycolysis, by making our body more efficient at creating more of a lactate sink, so to speak, a disposal mechanism for lactate. We clear it much faster. We don't allow it to build up and cause as much toxic effects. And what's interesting is, in between our last conversation and this one, I spent some time looking up research on exercise in relationship to galectin-3, and I found a number of studies that show, as a parallel, when you do exercise for the first time, you get a lot of DOMS, a lot of delayed onset muscle soreness. You feel sore for a day or two or three.
Right.
And this is in part muscle damage and inflammation and things like that. But if you keep doing that activity, the same activity that induced lots of soreness the first time or two that you did it no longer induces soreness a week or two later, after doing it, after repeated exposures to that stimulus multiple times.
Right.
What's interesting is there's research on this in relationship to galectin-3, where they've shown that exercise induces a big spike in galectin-3, but repeated exposure to exercise with exercise training, you actually reduce baseline levels of galectin-3, which is similar to, again, this parallel of reactive oxygen species. Exercise spikes reactive oxygen species, but then by engaging these adaptive mechanisms, you're paradoxically lowering baseline levels.
Yeah, fascinating. Totally. Yeah, that's great research. I didn't look at it specifically for exercise. Yeah, it's again, the exercising, really, for a muscle to contract, it has to relax.
Mm-hmm.
For a muscle to relax, it has to contract. That's the basic movement. When we come to this world, the first thing we do is we cry. We let go. We exhale. That's what we need in order to inhale. The last thing we do in this world is we let go. We exhale. Somebody. So it's always a dance, and the body is wise. And I think we are just, the beauty is there's so much research, so many publications going on, and so many great researchers that we are finding all these amazing analogies, and the principles are very similar, and we can get to it from many angles. And one thing that we can take as a practical advice from the study that you talked about, galectin-3 in exercise, is that consistency and repetition is very important.
Mm-hmm.
It's very important, and patience, and patience. And the one thing, and the other things, it's important to change routines in the same time,
mm-hmm.
because the body sometimes needs a break, so it doesn't develop tolerance, so it doesn't get stuck into a certain habit, because that's part of the flexibility, is to shift habits. When we look at the concept of miracle, what is a miracle? Miracle is something that is unexpected statistically. That's really the definition of a miracle,
Mm.
And if we have the same habit and we do the same thing again and again, our chances of an unexpected outcome is not as great, So this is part of adaptability. And in this sense, you can say that it's part of the spontaneous mutation process. The thing that the unexpected happens, and certain cells die, and certain cells discover an amazing way to survive, you know, because there are no habits there. It's very random. And of course, certain stresses will push mutation into a certain way. And of course, epigenetic expression is a survival mechanism, it's an adaptation. And it really is a fascinating, your word trade-off is, you know, for the listeners, viewer, the word trade-off that you used is bigger than trade-off. It's really a dance. It's really a dance, you know, it's right.
We sometimes read these stories of somebody who's, you know, 103 years old who, you know, swears that her secret to a long life is bacon and cigarettes or something like that.
But let me tell you why that is. See, I've connected some of these dots. Mm-hmm. So if you subscribe to the telomere theory of longevity, then you have to observe stress. And stress can have a hormetic effect, absolutely. It can actually make you stronger in small doses over periods of time. Mm-hmm. And when you're under stress all the time, your body ages very, very quickly. Mm-hmm. Well, from an evolutionary perspective, one of the greatest stresses we had was finding food every day. And so the predictability of certain things in your life reduce this very important stress. And so those people, when you meet these people, they're 100 years old, they're 95 years old, you say, what do you do? Well, I go to sleep every night at 8 o'clock. I get up in the morning, I have 2 eggs and a half pound of bacon. The afternoon, I go out for a walk. And then you say, now, how long have you been doing this? And they go, as long as I can remember. The body loves routine. The body loves predictability. The body will even allow you to do things that are counterproductive to your health if it creates that level of predictability that the body lowers stress. It's like, I expect to have that beer at 12 o'clock. I have that beer every day at 12 o'clock.
Mm-hmm. So what you're saying is sort of these, you know, chronic but intermittent, unexpected stressors that overwhelm the system are what are creating damage, but these sort of predictable routine stressors tend not to create damage?
And there's studies out there that show that binge drinkers, right? Oh, I don't drink at all, but then one night a month I go out and I get friggin' hammered, right? They see a lot more metabolic damage than the same person consuming the same volume of alcohol, but they do it in 1 glass of wine a night. Mm-hmm. And it's like, oh my God, that's actually improving that person's health and longevity. And this guy doesn't drink all month, but then one night he goes out and, he just drinks a bottle of tequila and he catches up. And he's the guy that ends up with the heart attack.
This is an interesting thought, but, exercise is sort of a classic hormetic stressor that is associated with all, a mountain of thousands of studies showing health benefits and protection from various diseases. But through the lens that you're talking about, in somebody who is not consistent with their exercise, maybe they go through bursts of a few weeks where they're, really excited about exercising and dedicated to getting in shape, and then they kind of fall off the wagon, and then a few months later they get back into it. Could you almost make an argument that those people might be doing damage?
They're the ones that have heart attacks, right? I have a friend whose father brags to me all the time that he's never exercised, that he's very, very overweight, he's very sick, but he has friends that exercised and they died before him. And I think about it, and I think to myself, well, what are you calling exercise? And what a lot of people do is they're weekend warriors. Saturday and Sunday they go and they train, and Monday through Friday they crap on themselves. And that's the person who ends up having the stroke and the heart attack. And then people go, well, he always exercises. No, he didn't always exercise. And you see, exercise is different. And I'll tell you why. Because we've had to manufacture an artificial way to be active. We have to call it exercise. Because 200 years ago, 300 years ago, you and I, we would have been out in the fields day and night. We would have been hunting. We would have been managing our cabins. We would have been patching holes. We would have got up in the morning and got going, and we wouldn't have gotten done until it got dark out. We couldn't work anymore. We would have come in, and you only slept in your house. I actually saw Lincoln's cabin. And 4 people were able to sleep in there, but they didn't live in there. In the morning when you woke up, you got out. There was no room to be in there. Yeah. And so when you look at this exercise, it gets a little cloudier, because what we're really trying to do with exercise is somehow compensate for the lack of of activity that modernity has cursed us with.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, exercise, exercise that can hurt you. You know, you train too hard, you're overtrained, you stay in that zone too long, you're gonna end up getting sick. I mean, we see a lot of Olympic athletes, they're always on the verge of getting the flu or the cold because they push themselves so hard, their immune system starts to shut down.
Yeah, when I went through several years where I was, you know, kind of chronically overtraining and, you know, doing 2-3 hours a day of intense exercise. And I was kind of, if I pushed my workouts too hard 3 days in a row, I would always seem to run down my immune system and start to come down with something. So yeah, it's definitely not that hard to get there if you're.
And now let's take warriors for a second, real warriors, right? You can go back in time or you can go to today. The guys who actually do the shooters in the military, special forces and stuff like that, they're not doing CrossFit. They're not doing powerlifting, right? What they learn to do is put an 80-pound rucksack on their back and walk for 15 miles and 20 miles. They're just walking. That's all they're doing. And you'd say to yourself, well, you know, what does that do? Because that is the core of human evolutionary, what's the word I'm looking for? I guess activity, okay? We walked all around this globe, this earth, finding better circumstances, better food sources. During the Ice Age, 40,000 years, we went other places. We couldn't stay there. We were going to freeze to death and die. So we walked for long distances. In fact, Dr. David, oh God, I can't believe, it'll come to me. But the guy who wrote the story of the human body, he's been on my show. And he's
Lieberman.
Yeah, Lieberman. I wasn't sure. You know, like I've done so many shows, sometimes the names kind of get even jumbled up for me. But he said one of the greatest evolutionary things that we did was standing on two legs, ambulating on two legs. It changed the design of our hips, our legs, our feet. It changed everything. But once we were able to stand up and walk, that was a game changer for us because we could go long distance. We could walk further than any of the, in fact, early hunting was called persistence hunting because what they did is a group of guys followed an antelope until it got tired of running and it laid down under a tree because it was sweating, it was tired, and then when we stick a spear in it and they'd eat it. That would be it.
Yeah.
So the core of activity is walking, but no one walks anymore. And in fact, lower back problems, lumbar back problems can be cured by walking.
Yeah.
And what is the number one problem people have in their back today? Lumbar back problems. Everybody. Why? Nobody walks anymore.
Yeah, it's because we're stuck sitting at a desk for 8 hours a day instead of walking around for 8 hours a day. So, you know, just to kind of encapsulate in maybe different words what you were getting at there, what you're saying is exercise is kind of an odd modern invention that we're trying to sort of take our ancestral lifestyle where we might have spent 10 hours a day outdoors moving our bodies, doing maybe a moderate level of physical activity for most of that time, or even a light level of physical activity. And we're trying to then, now in the modern world, sit around all day and then encapsulate our workouts
condense it into an hour workout. Yeah, condense it into an hour workout.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, it has value.
Yeah.
Training for an hour intensely is a good idea if you're going to relax a little bit and sit around at a desk. But it's not going to do the same thing as being active all day long. It's just not.
Now, a quick follow-up on that question. What are your thoughts on super intense exercise? Is that something, you know, in the context of longevity and anti-aging, is that something that you feel is maybe overdone and overemphasized, and maybe people should be pushing back to more moderate and light physical activity? Or, you know, kind of what's your take on intense physical?
I think we do have to oscillate that. I'm a huge proponent of very intense exercise. In fact, I'm always pushing further. I'm always pushing further. Progression is the key, as far as I'm concerned. But you do have to balance that with time out of the gym or recovery type workouts. You absolutely have to. Because otherwise you're not going to progress. You're going to regress. Yeah. You're not going to make the progress you want.
Yeah.
I do think that intensity is a very subjective thing, right? There's a lot of people out there that just doing, I don't know, farmers walks with 50-pound dumbbells in each hand, it's like killing them.
Yeah.
You know, and so it's very individual, it's very subjective, but I think that people should always be trying to get a little bit more done in whatever they're doing. There should be progress. And if for no other reason, because as you age, you automatically lose muscle, you automatically lose strength, you automatically lose brain synapses, you automatically lose these things. And I usually like to use the analogy of a house. So you invest, you buy a house, and you live in it for 30 years, and you never really upgrade it. But when something breaks, you fix it. So the door handles break, you just put new screws in them. And then 30 years later, you look at the house, you go, holy crap, this house is literally falling apart. Mm-hmm. Because it takes upgrades in order to maintain. Because the natural process is erosion. And so if you're not overbuilding and supercompensating, the net is always loss, losing. And you need to at least stay status quo. In order to stay status quo, you have to push past that because it's always eroding. Mm-hmm. And so I'm 60 years old now. I have a surgery set up in 3 weeks. I really messed up my left foot, and it's cost me a lot of lower body strength. I will get it back. But I'm getting stronger in upper body movements that I didn't think I could get any stronger in. And so this idea that, you know, you can't, if your mindset is to progress and you do it smart, you know, not every day. You can't go in and crush it every single day. You need to be a little more patient. This is a long distance project. It's not a sprint. And you absolutely can increase your strength, increase your muscularity. And look, the linkage between strength and longevity have been established. There's no arguing it. Mm-hmm. Look, a strong organism, right? You have a virus and you give it a little bit of an antibiotic, not enough to kill it, it gets stronger. Then you have to give it even more than the original amount to kill it. Yeah. We're an organism. Strength is strength. We're strong. We can resist illness if we're strong. And so the linkage between physical strength and vitality has been well established. So I think that it's a smart thing to pursue strength. And that's why I don't talk about bodybuilding. I talk about physical culture. I don't care what it is you do that you love, but you must be physical as part of the longevity prescription. Absolutely.